Picture yourself, for a moment, not in a dimly lit jazz bar with cigarette smoke drifting beneath neon lights, but somewhere far older, a shadowy clearing tens of thousands of years ago. The air is filled not with electricity and music, but with the sharp, earthy scent of smoke rising from a bundle of unfamiliar leaves burning over a crackling fire. Gathered around the flames are several people, far more like you than you might expect. They're not simply trying to stay warm or keep predators away. They're doing something deliberate, something unusual. They lean closer, close their eyes, their faces glowing in the firelight, and slowly inhale the thick, swirling smoke from the burning plants. Not once, not by accident, again and again, with a sense of ritual, purpose, and perhaps even reverence. Why? Why would people whose lives revolved around survival willingly breathe smoke into their lungs? Why accept the sting in their throats for sensations they barely understood? Imagine that very first inhale, the sudden rush, the light-headed feeling, perhaps a strange sense of connection or awe. Was it curiosity, desperation, or something much deeper, something woven into human nature itself? Now fast forward to today. Some things have changed. We have sleek vapes, e-cigarettes, flavored tobacco, and cannabis pens glowing blue at parties. But step back for a moment and ask yourself this. Are these really modern inventions, or are they echoes of something much older, a habit, or perhaps a longing, that reaches all the way back to the moment humans first learned to control fire? Here's the question no one ever asks in health class or history lessons. Just how old is humanity's complicated relationship with smoke? Who were the first people to intentionally breathe in those twisting clouds, and what were they searching for? Is there an invisible thread connecting that ancient experiment beside the fire to your neighbor's late-night vape session? Because once you begin exploring the history of smoking, you'll discover it's far more than a harmful habit, or even a ritual. It's a window into what it means to be human, our desire to experience altered states, to search for meaning, to build community, and to reach for something beyond ourselves. And if you think smoking is simply a relic of the past or a dangerous modern vice, you may want to keep watching, because this story burns at the very roots of human history. Let's pause for a moment before we dive into dates and archaeological discoveries, and ask a question that is both surprisingly simple and deeply unsettling. Why do humans seek out smoke, not just once, not by accident, but again and again, across every era of history? Is there any other animal on Earth that deliberately burns plants, inhales the smoke, and embraces the strange sensations that follow? Some animals accidentally become intoxicated, parrots nibble fermented fruit, elephants feast on overripe marula, but humans are different. We create our intoxication, we refine it, we ritualize it, we celebrate it, and sometimes, we pay a devastating price for it. So why? What is it about the human mind that creates this relentless desire for altered consciousness? Modern psychology and neuroscience have started to uncover the answer, a mystery wrapped, quite fittingly, in smoke. It turns out that the human brain isn't designed simply to exist. It's restless, endlessly curious, and constantly searching for reward. Deep within the brain, the limbic system, the emotional center of our minds, craves novelty, stimulation, and transcendence. For us, simply surviving has rarely been enough. We possess a persistent urge to push beyond ordinary experience, to chase feelings of euphoria, connection, revelation, or spiritual awe. Consider what scientists call altered states of consciousness. Modern brain imaging has confirmed something ancient shamans seemed to understand thousands of years ago. During altered states, whether produced by smoke, rhythmic chanting, dancing, meditation, or psychoactive substances, the brain's default mode network becomes less active while entirely different neural pathways light up. For a brief time, the brain reorganizes itself, allowing us to step outside ordinary perception and, sometimes, even outside our normal sense of self. This isn't simply about pleasure. It's about escaping routine, expanding perception, and discovering meaning in places that once seemed ordinary. The story becomes even more fascinating. Anthropologists have discovered that virtually every known human society, even the most isolated, developed rituals, ceremonies, or substances specifically designed to transport people beyond everyday awareness. Sometimes these experiences were used for healing. Sometimes they were believed to reveal divine knowledge. Sometimes they strengthened social bonds. And sometimes they simply reminded people that life could feel larger than survival alone. This universal drive toward ritualized transformation, whether through smoke, music, psychedelics, prayer, or dance, became a foundation of culture itself. Entire generations carefully preserved the knowledge of which plants could heal, which could inspire visions, and which could become deadly if misunderstood. And throughout nearly all of these traditions, smoke appears again and again, mysterious, fleeting, and symbolic. Smoke transforms everything it touches. It blurs boundaries, softens reality, and turns the ordinary into something almost supernatural. Fire captivates the human imagination, but smoke became its messenger, carrying prayers toward the heavens, signaling rituals, and inviting altered states of mind. Perhaps it's no coincidence that our relationship with smoke, whether sacred or recreational, stretches across thousands of years, connecting shamans and priests, healers and philosophers, warriors and wanderers, teenagers experimenting for the first time, and adults searching for something they can't quite name. But here's the real mystery. When did humans first decide that inhaling the smoke from a burning plant could reveal something beyond ordinary experience? What inspired someone, somewhere, to move beyond simply gathering around a fire for warmth and intentionally breathe in the fumes of an unfamiliar plant? Was it an accident, a moment of extraordinary curiosity, or something even stranger? That single leap, from simply using fire to intentionally inhaling its smoke, marked far more than a new behavior. It represented a turning point in human history, expanding not only what we did, but how we understood ourselves and the world around us. So where did it all begin? And what forgotten stories still lie hidden beneath the ashes of humanity's very first smoky experiments? That's where the real mystery, and the real adventure, truly begins. To uncover the origins of smoking, we have to let go of almost everything we think we know about the habit. Forget cigarettes, cigars, and even hookahs. Let's turn the clock back, beyond the pharaohs and philosophers, beyond the first written words, to a time when history existed only in stories told around the fire. Because this is where the first mysteries begin, not in civilization, but in the wilderness, at the crossroads of fire, plants, and human curiosity. The evidence, as you might expect, is incredibly faint: shadows in the soil, blackened stains on ancient clay, microscopic traces left where human lips once touched wood thousands of years ago. But for archaeologists searching for the origins of smoking, these tiny clues reveal a much bigger story. Our first stop takes us to the heart of North America around 5,500 years ago. In the fertile river valleys of what is now Alabama, archaeologists uncovered an extraordinary artifact, a gently curved stone pipe, darkened by time, its bowl still carrying traces of burned plant material. It is the oldest confirmed smoking pipe ever discovered in the Americas, dating to approximately 3,500 BCE. And the story it tells is both simple and remarkable. Someone repeatedly packed this pipe with carefully selected leaves, lit them, placed the carved mouthpiece to their lips, and intentionally inhaled the smoke. At first glance, it may seem strange to be amazed by a simple pipe. After all, ancient tools are everywhere. But modern scientific analysis revealed something far more significant. The residue wasn't from just any plant, it came from species deliberately chosen for their psychoactive properties. This wasn't accidental smoke inhalation or the desperate act of someone sitting too close to a fire for warmth. It was a practiced ritual, repeated over generations, likely woven into ceremonies that connected people with spirits, ancestors, or one another. The pipe tells us not only about ancient knowledge of plants, but about meaning itself. Smoke had become a gateway to another world. Now travel halfway across the globe to the windswept grasslands of Central Asia. Beneath the massive burial mounds, known as kurgans, of the ancient Scythians, archaeologists uncovered another silent witness to early smoking: piles of charred hemp seeds, beautifully crafted bronze braziers, and artwork depicting robed figures standing among swirling clouds of smoke. Around 500 BCE, the Greek historian Herodotus visited these nomadic people. He described how they threw hemp onto hot stones, creating thick clouds of smoke that caused the Scythians to howl with pleasure. For centuries, these plant remains were dismissed as evidence of ordinary fires. But modern residue analysis uncovered unmistakable traces of psychoactive compounds, confirming that this was intentional inhalation, a deliberate technology for transforming consciousness. What connects these two stories, separated by oceans and thousands of years, is intention. These were not isolated accidents. They were repeated practices woven into the fabric of social and spiritual life. Whether made of stone or bronze, whether using a pipe or a brazier, the technology always points to the same goal: creating smoke, inhaling it, and altering consciousness, sometimes alone, but often together. It's easy to imagine people gathered in a circle, watching one another through the haze, sharing not only the smoke itself but perhaps a glimpse of something sacred. Even cave art from much earlier periods appears to hint at smoky rituals. Mysterious human figures, swirling streams of breath, trance-like scenes painted beside burning bundles, all suggest that long before cities existed, people had already built ceremonies around altered states of consciousness. Entire cultures invested meaning in the power of smoke, using it to reveal the unseen, to drive away spirits, or perhaps to invite them closer. The mystery only grows deeper. Were these early smokers searching for the divine, for healing, for courage, or simply for a way to experience something beyond ordinary life? In every ancient ember, archaeologists see evidence of a desire far more deliberate than simple curiosity. Because these earliest discoveries continue to ask the same question: when our ancestors transformed plants into smoke and breathed them into their bodies, what were they truly searching for? And how much of that same longing still lives within us today? If smoking was one of humanity's earliest technologies for shaping experience, what does it reveal about the kind of creatures we've always been? The search for those answers is only beginning. To understand how smoking evolved from a mysterious experiment into a widespread cultural tradition, we need to imagine a world where inhaling smoke wasn't hidden, lonely, or shameful. Instead, picture societies where smoke drifted through sacred temples, simple wooden huts, and richly decorated palaces, swirling between the robes of priests and the outstretched hands of healers. It was in these places that smoking found its true purpose, not as a private habit, but as a powerful shared human experience. Let's begin in the Americas, among indigenous communities whose relationship with tobacco stretches back more than 2,000 years. For many Native American cultures, tobacco was, and in many communities, still is, deeply sacred. Lighting a pipe, whether a simple corncob pipe or an elaborately carved calumet, often called a peace pipe, was far more than a ritual. It was a spiritual gateway. As the smoke rose into the sky, it was believed to connect the earth with the heavens, the body with the spirit. Gathered in circles, communities used tobacco during ceremonies to seal treaties, seek visions, and honor grief. Tobacco wasn't simply smoke, it was carefully grown, harvested, and offered as a prayer. For the Lakota Sioux, for example, every puff carried a message to their ancestors and strengthened the bonds of the community. But the story doesn't end in the Americas. Now travel to ancient India, centuries before the birth of Christ, where cannabis was valued not only as medicine but also as a sacred gift. The Atharva Veda, one of Hinduism's oldest sacred texts, describes cannabis as a source of happiness, a giver of joy, and a liberator. Here, smoke wasn't inhaled simply for pleasure. It served as a pathway to meditation, spiritual insight, music, and religious ecstasy. Even today, during festivals such as Holi and Maha Shivaratri, some devotees consume bhang, a cannabis-infused drink, or smoke from traditional chillums in the hope of feeling closer to Lord Shiva. The great yogi now crossed the deserts into ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, where smoke rose not from pipes but from temple altars. The fragrant resins of frankincense and myrrh burned inside bronze braziers, filling the temples of the pharaohs and the towering ziggurats of Babylon. These aromatic smokes were far more than pleasant scents. They were believed to cleanse disease, repel evil, and purify sacred spaces. In these great civilizations, smoke marked the boundary between the ordinary world and the divine, blurring the line between the living and the dead. Now journey into the rainforests of Central America hundreds of years ago. Imagine Maya kings dressed in magnificent jaguar pelts, seated upon towering stone thrones. Their priests prepared tobacco, sometimes mixed with other psychoactive plants, rolling it into cigars or packing it into hollow tubes before sending thick streams of smoke toward the heavens. Ancient carvings and painted pottery depict rulers exhaling enormous clouds above their heads, not as casual enjoyment, but as sacred communication. For the Maya, smoke connected rulers with the gods, guided important decisions, and offered courage for spiritual journeys into the underworld. Smoke carried authority, reinforced tradition, and linked the human world with the divine. Now travel north into the frozen forests and tundra of Siberia. Among the Evenki and other indigenous peoples, juniper and birch were burned during sacred ceremonies. Their sharp, medicinal scent drifted through the icy air as shamans sat beside the fire, inhaling the smoke while entering deep trance states. Guided by chanting and ritual, they believed they could travel beyond the visible world. Smoke became a vessel for the soul and a bridge to the spirit realm, helping shamans heal the sick, predict the future, and recover those believed to be spiritually lost. Across all of these remarkably different cultures, smoke served a purpose far beyond the physical act of inhalation. It united people through ritual, strengthened communities, and created shared moments of mystery and transformation. In every tradition, smoke offered something that food, medicine, and even music alone could not. It allowed people to stretch beyond ordinary consciousness and briefly step into another reality. Whether the goal was healing, guidance, mourning, or celebration, smoking was almost always a communal experience. Smoke rises, spreads, and cannot be contained. It connects, surrounds, and invites. If you step back for a moment, you'll notice a common thread running through every one of these traditions: the desire to transform ordinary life, create sacred moments, and bring people together through shared wonder and vulnerability. From Maya kings to Siberian shamans, from Native American peace ceremonies to Hindu mystics, smoke carried the same invitation: come with us. Step into the unknown. Share the risk, the mystery, and the transformation. Long before smoking became associated with habit or addiction, it meant something entirely different. It was ceremony. It was medicine. It was one of humanity's oldest tools for creating belonging. Why did so many cultures reach for smoke? Because within every rising cloud, they saw an opportunity to confront life's oldest questions. Who am I? Where do I belong? And what lies beyond this world? For them, the answers seemed to wait just beyond a veil of fragrant smoke. But what happens when sacred rituals become everyday habits, and the extraordinary slowly becomes ordinary? That's where the story takes its next dramatic turn. Every human ritual begins somewhere small, inside a stone temple, around a flickering village fire, or behind the curtain of an oracle's trance. But sometimes, that ritual escapes its boundaries. It spreads across fields, deserts, and eventually the world, moving from the hands of priests into the lives of ordinary people. Few habits crossed that line more successfully, or more rapidly, than smoking. The real question isn't just how or why, but when did smoking stop being a sacred privilege and become an everyday social custom woven into the fabric of society? Let's begin with tobacco, the undisputed centerpiece of ancient smoking traditions. For centuries, tobacco played a sacred role in indigenous cultures across the Americas, carefully guarded by spiritual leaders and deeply connected to prayer and ceremony. Then came a major agricultural breakthrough. Tobacco was no longer limited to sacred gardens or small ceremonial plots. By the first millennium CE, indigenous farmers were cultivating large fields, selectively breeding plants for greater strength, flavor, and potency. Smoking tools became increasingly common, from clay pipes decorated with tribal symbols to rolled tobacco leaves that looked surprisingly familiar. Before long, tobacco had become part of feasts, games, diplomatic gatherings, and, most importantly, community celebrations. What had once been sacred smoke gradually became a form of social currency. Tobacco's spread wasn't driven by curiosity alone. It was powered by trade. Along the busy trade routes of the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys, bundles of dried tobacco passed from one tribe to another, increasing in value with every exchange, every story, and every alliance they represented. Trade expanded the plant's reach. What had once belonged only to spiritual leaders became something shared by hunters, artisans, families, and warriors alike. Tobacco came to symbolize community, a shared moment of peace, connection, and mutual understanding that belonged to everyone, not just the powerful. But tobacco wasn't the only plant to undergo this transformation. Across the world, another ancient plant was carving out a similar path. By the 10th century, throughout Persia and the broader Arab world, cannabis, once associated primarily with mystics and spiritual seekers, began taking on a new social role. Coffeehouses, where merchants, scholars, and travelers gathered, became vibrant centers of conversation and, often, smoke-filled discussion. In the cafes of Baghdad and Cairo, the air carried the scent of burning hashish. Smoking the pipe of dreams was no longer a solitary ritual but a communal experience. People gathered to recite poetry, debate philosophy, play backgammon, and laugh together late into the night. What made these gathering places so compelling wasn't simply the effects of the plants themselves. It was the sense of belonging they created. In Persia, the cannabis pipe became a social equalizer, bringing together strangers, laborers, mystics, merchants, and nobles, whose differences seemed to fade with every shared puff. In pre-Columbian America, passing a pipe or sharing a bowl could celebrate a successful hunt, seal a marriage, or simply honor the setting sun. As smoking became more widespread, its meaning expanded. It remained a tradition, but it also became a trend. Better farming techniques made tobacco and cannabis more accessible, trade routes carried seeds and customs across vast regions, and the simple desire to belong, to avoid being the only person without a pipe or cigar, became a powerful social force. Beneath it all lay one deeply human instinct, the desire to connect, to share unusual experiences, and to strengthen bonds with those around us. Gradually, the age of the solitary shaman gave way to marketplaces, homes, and crowded streets. Sacred rituals loosened their hold, and smoke became woven into everyday life through stories, celebrations, laughter, and companionship. Choosing not to participate could sometimes mean more than missing an experience. It could mean standing outside the community itself. It's no surprise, then, that smoking spread across cultures, continents, and social classes, with its social influence eventually becoming even stronger than its spiritual roots. But the world was far larger than any single civilization. Tobacco and cannabis had already transformed the societies where they originated. The next question is even bigger: how did these ancient smoking traditions cross oceans, reshape distant cultures, and eventually change the world? The global story of smoke was only beginning. If smoke had once been the mysterious language of shamans and priests, something extraordinary happened during the age of exploration. Suddenly, what had once been sacred became profitable, and what had once been ritual became a global trend. This was the moment smoke stopped belonging to one people, one place, or one tradition and became one of the world's most sought-after commodities. The spark that ignited this transformation came from one of history's most famous encounters: Christopher Columbus and his crew arriving in the Caribbean. Instead of finding only the gold and spices they had hoped for, the Spanish explorers encountered something entirely unexpected. Indigenous people carried unusual pipes, calmly inhaling fragrant tobacco smoke before exhaling thick clouds with practiced ease. The sailors watched in fascination and confusion as this unfamiliar ritual seemed completely natural to the people around them. The earliest written accounts described the experience with equal parts curiosity and disbelief. When Columbus's crew tried smoking for themselves, they coughed, struggled, and eventually reported the plant's surprisingly calming effects to a Europe that had never experienced anything quite like it. Before long, Spanish and Portuguese ships began carrying tobacco seeds and dried leaves across the Atlantic. What followed wasn't a slow cultural shift, it spread like wildfire. Within just a few decades, tobacco was growing in Spanish gardens, French estates, and English countryside homes. Europe's upper class, fascinated by everything associated with the New World, quickly embraced tobacco as a symbol of wealth and sophistication. Even members of Queen Elizabeth I's royal court adopted the habit. Wearing elegant clothing and carrying finely crafted pipes, they treated every puff as a fashionable step into a modern age. But it wasn't only pleasure that fueled tobacco's popularity. Many people believed it possessed remarkable medicinal powers. Physicians and apothecaries claimed tobacco could relieve headaches, treat melancholy, improve breathing, and even eliminate bad breath. Pharmacies began selling tobacco powders, snuff, and medicinal preparations, turning this mysterious American plant into what many considered a miracle cure. In France, Jean Nicot, the diplomat whose name would later inspire the word nicotine, recommended tobacco to Queen Catherine de' Medici as a treatment for migraines. Within a short time, tobacco evolved from an exotic curiosity into one of Europe's fastest-growing industries. Meanwhile, across the Ottoman Empire, smoking developed in a different direction. Rather than simply adopting tobacco, Ottoman craftsmen refined the smoking experience itself. During the 16th century, they adapted earlier Indian and Persian water pipes into what became known as the hookah, or shisha. In the courtyards of Istanbul and Cairo, the gentle bubbling of water pipes and the sweet aroma of flavored tobacco became part of everyday social life. Preparing a hookah, lighting the charcoal, and sharing it with guests became an expression of hospitality, friendship, and cultural sophistication. Never before had the world witnessed such a rapid fusion of habit, commerce, and innovation. Tobacco plantations expanded across the Caribbean and the American colonies. Smoking houses appeared throughout London, Amsterdam, and other European cities. Exotic crops generated enormous wealth, while merchants competed to supply an ever-growing global demand. Nobles, merchants, sailors, laborers, and even pirates all became part of the expanding culture of smoking. Yet this remarkable growth carried hidden costs. For every monarch or noble enjoying tobacco, countless laborers, many of them enslaved, were forced to cultivate it under brutal conditions. Smoking was no longer simply a ritual or a pastime. It had become the engine of a vast global economy, built in many places on exploitation and human suffering. At the same time, the health consequences remained largely invisible, concealed behind generations of fragrant smoke and widespread misconceptions. This was the true turning point. Smoke was no longer local, sacred, or deeply personal. It had become a worldwide obsession, a symbol of status, trade, wealth, and eventually addiction. Humanity had collectively taken a deep breath as smoking spread from temples and tribal ceremonies into the very heart of modern civilization. But what happens when pleasure, profit, and the human brain collide? That story is written deep within our biology and the chemistry of our minds, and it's the next chapter in this remarkable journey. What keeps humans reaching for smoke across generations and cultures? Beneath the rituals and traditions lies a powerful biological process. Nicotine, the main compound in tobacco, rapidly enters the brain and binds to receptors linked to acetylcholine. This triggers the release of dopamine, the brain's reward chemical, making the experience feel important and encouraging the brain to repeat it. Over time, this process can develop into addiction. Cannabis works differently. Its active compound, THC, interacts with the body's endocannabinoid system, influencing mood, memory, appetite, and perception. It can create feelings of relaxation, euphoria, or creativity, but it may also cause anxiety. Ancient cultures often viewed these altered states as spiritual experiences, while many modern users see them as a temporary escape from stress. The desire for reward isn't limited to smoking. Social media, video games, and even entertainment activate similar reward pathways in the brain. Humans evolved to seek comfort, reduce stress, and strengthen social bonds, making us naturally drawn to experiences that provide relief or pleasure. This is why the story of smoke is ultimately the story of the human brain. From ancient rituals to modern cigarettes and smartphones, we continue searching for moments of comfort. The challenge is recognizing when that search begins to cost more than it gives. For much of the 20th century, smoking became an everyday habit rather than a sacred ritual. Cigarettes, cigars, and pipes were everywhere, in homes, restaurants, offices, and movies. Iconic characters on screen often held a cigarette, while many families remember the familiar smell of tobacco at gatherings or in the family car. For millions, smoke became a symbol of comfort, adulthood, and belonging. Behind that image, however, cigarettes were fueling one of history's largest nicotine addiction crises. Mass production made them cheap and widely available, while advertising linked smoking with confidence, freedom, success, and glamour. As a result, smoking became deeply woven into modern culture. Everything changed when scientific research revealed the devastating health effects of smoking, including lung cancer, heart disease, and emphysema. Governments responded with warning labels, advertising bans, higher taxes, and public smoking restrictions. Gradually, smoking shifted from being socially admired to widely recognized as a serious health risk. Yet nicotine did not disappear. Instead, new products such as e-cigarettes and vaping devices emerged, promising a cleaner alternative while preserving the familiar ritual of inhaling nicotine. This raised a new question: had society defeated nicotine addiction, or simply reinvented it? For many people, quitting remains a difficult challenge. Stress, anxiety, and the search for comfort continue to drive nicotine use, just as they have throughout history. The story of smoking is therefore much bigger than tobacco. It reflects humanity's timeless desire for relief, connection, and reward. From ancient rituals to modern vaping, the craving remains remarkably familiar, reminding us that while the tools may change, human nature often does not. In the end, the story of smoking is about far more than tobacco or cannabis. It is a story about the human desire for comfort, connection, transformation, and meaning. From ancient campfires to modern city streets, smoke has reflected our search for something beyond ordinary life. Although our rituals have changed, our emotions have not. Today, we may reach for coffee, light a candle, burn incense, scroll through our phones, or gather with friends instead of sharing a pipe. The objects are different, but the need to feel connected, comforted, or inspired remains the same. This journey is not about judging the past or the people who smoke. It is about understanding that the search for relief, curiosity, and belonging has always been part of being human. The real lesson is to choose our rituals with awareness, recognizing how deeply they are rooted in history. The next time you see smoke rising into the sky, remember that it represents not only the past, but humanity's timeless search for meaning and connection.